host myself again, so I can talk about fucking Double Team and what movie I'm gonna watch next. I realized at the end of the last video when I said I was gonna watch Double Team, like this thought just crossed my mind. Oh, that's not straight enough. Oh, that's gonna bug me. This thought just crossed my mind that it was gonna be very tedious to watch Double Team alone. Because bad movies are fun. In a group, you're chatting, you talk through the boring parts, and you laugh at the funny parts. And when you're by yourself, you watch the boring parts, and the funny parts aren't funny. So, I mean, there's nothing to be said about Double Team. Everyone's done videos on it, why it was a fucking disaster. The original script got changed so much from what Van Damme signed on for. And like I said in my last video, he should have just walked anyways, take the lawsuit, it's fucking fine. But instead he made this terrible, terrible movie that makes no sense and crams together so many silly ideas. Like they try and start with an exciting opening scene, a la True Lies. True Lies was the first movie I saw where I really caught that they were like, listen, we gotta give the audience what they want immediately, but can't have any impact on the story, so here's an opening action sequence that has nothing to do with anything. And the opening sequence sucks. It's just a really shitty car stunt sequence with a big ugly truck. And then that supposedly kicks off the story that Van Damme then gets to retire because he succeeded in that mission. And then he immediately comes out of retirement because he's the only one who can catch Mickey Rourke. And then Mickey Rourke is glad that Van Damme's out of retirement because he wants to kill him. Which, you don't need to be unretired to be murderable. You could just go to his house and kill him. He'd still be an excellent combatant, I'm sure. So, even there you have like trying to cram in 3 different stories and it being really off-kilter and irritating and not serving any goddamn purpose. Like the in and out of retirement stuff, irrelevant. No explanation at this point in the film why Mickey Rourke wants to kill Van Damme, because then there's an action sequence where Mickey Rourke's child is killed and Van Damme is tangentially responsible. So then they have a vengeance motive. So whatever happened before, who cares? It is also then that Van Damme is abducted and taken to the colony, a thing that's it's a rip-off of The Prisoner and it makes no fucking sense. You can, like, if you need the greatest criminal and anti-criminal minds of a generation to come together to work on solving crime, you can just hire them to do that. You don't need to kidnap them, build an elaborate secret base, and then force them to live there and fake their deaths. That costs more than just paying them a lot. The training montage then sucks. His escape from the island is so stupid and irritating. The person supposedly trying to catch him and bring him back is stupid and irritating. And then we get his relationship with Dennis Rodman that makes no sense. They met once prior. It's not enough to go on that Van Damme would then seek him out to arm up and use as a connection. Like, he doesn't actually like need many weapons. Like, you can just get a gun. And then Mickey Rourke kidnaps Van Damme's wife, who believes he's dead for reasons unexplained. Because Van Damme Like, does Mickey Rourke know that Van Damme is fake dead? Who can fucking say? But yeah, Dennis Rodman decides that he's tagging along and that it's important to him, and he just like becomes emotionally invested after they just kind of get over the bullshit of like, oh, he's in it for the money, he's in it for this or that. He just decides at one point like, I'm all in because this is about kids, which it really isn't. And then the only like the cybermonk base is the only good part. They wanted to do, I said this before, they want to do a James Bond thing with like locations, costumes, gadgets, and none of it fucking pays off. The costume scene in Rome is the only funny one. And then that fight scene with the toe knife is idiotic beyond belief. And then the movie just kind of wraps up. You get to the Coliseum, you get to the Coke machine ending. And then it's over, and you get to go and you get to hear Dennis Rodman's fucking rap at the end. It's brutal. And then luckily it's over. Next, I'm gonna watch Time Cop. It's starting to get down, starting to run out of movies here. So I had to go look at the stack, and I was like, well, I haven't talked about Time Cop yet, so. My previewing vibe on Time Cop, hopefully battery holds out, is I loved it when I was a kid. It was one of my more watched ones because it was actually new. Like, I don't know if I saw it in theaters or not. I saw some Van Dammes in theaters when I was young. But I really liked Time Cop when I was a kid because I like sci-fi and before even watching it again, I always use it as an example of very bad time travel storytelling. Because I realized when thinking about it, like the problem of time travel duplicates, when Van Damme travels from 2000 whatever to 95, and then he travels back to 2000 whatever and is surprised to meet his wife and everything. Where is the Van Damme from 95 who lived and has all those memories? Like, is he also about to come home from work? And then once I thought about that, I was just like, oh yeah, like, so much of the... Because time travel stories have to stick to their own rules. I don't care that it's impossible and it doesn't make sense. If you make it make sense and stick to your rules, you can get a good story out of it. And it just doesn't. You have to decide in a time travel story if things are happening for the first time or not. Right? If you go back and change something, if you lived from 95 to 2000, and you go back and change something, it either is happening for the first time, and then you live with those consequences, or you should run into yourself. You 95 should remember being visited by your 2000 self as well. And this movie just does both. Things flicker on and off for all concerned. People forget each other completely, and yet implicitly trust each other. It doesn't actually add anything to the story. Like, the villain dies in an explosion when he goes back to 95, but because he's not dead in 95, he doesn't die in 2000, whatever. But at the end, when they're both there, supposedly, now he's really dead. Which makes no fucking sense. The action scenes aren't that great. It has my favorite splits because the splits is so silly. I love when the splits are just obligatorily crammed in and it shows. There are no interesting characters whatsoever because Van Damme isn't an interesting character. It doesn't ask any great ethical questions about time travel. Another thing that really fucking bugs me is they explain that there's only one person who's figured out time travel, and he has one machine. And then when someone else is going back and there are ripples in time, they immediately figure out like, oh, it's got to be his prototype, and then they don't do anything. Like, if you control the only mechanism of doing something, then you don't need to police that something. If you own the only car in the world, you don't need to invent traffic laws and enforce them. You don't need an army of traffic cops. So even that premise doesn't make any sense. still feel, all that said, I still feel some affection for the movie because I loved it when I was a kid, because it's sci-fi, because it was trying to do something, and because it's very memorable. The opening scene with the rollerblading guy, I think, is fun. That's about it, really. Like, so I don't expect it to be a great watch. Oh yeah, the villain just sucks. He's just a smarmy douchebag who's unlikable, and that's his whole tip. He's not menacing or threatening. He doesn't have great goons. He's just a greedy guy who wants to run for president. And his personal connection to Van Damme also feels like it doesn't make any sense, but I'll see that when I watch the film. Anyways, that's the discussion. Onward to the past. That was